So right now, just thinking about what are parts. So parts are clusters of thoughts, sensation, and images that are these sub-personalities that live within our mind and our body. And so these clusters are the formations that are really, they come from the nature of mind. They come from a very altruistic place. They come from a place where the human body and mind and soul, if you will, is intrinsically good. So there are no bad parts. There's actually no part that's bad, and that all parts are welcome. And because they're coming from the purest nature of mind. And what happens over time is that different parts of our mind that have intrinsic value and have intrinsic worth and roles, they experience hard times. So they experience trauma, they experience loss, they experience some kind of hardship or burden. They can experience those burdens throughout our life. They could also experience these burdens systemically, so in our culture. They can also experience burdens that have happened over time, so that have happened to our ancestors, our relatives, and there's a trickle-down effect that happens. And those kind of legacy burdens are also ways that parts of us take on different core beliefs or burdens or roles that are not intrinsic to our nature. So with that in mind, that means that all parts are inherently good, but they can take on roles that are extreme to try to protect us. So I think of parts as having two overall flavors. One is protective. Like, we have parts of us that, like, their mission is to protect us. And within that protection, some are reactive, like they will react to something that's happening. So reactive part would be like addictions or watching Netflix ad nauseum, like it's reacting to stress. The other form of protection is trying to prevent stress. So it'll be like worrying or obsessing, or, you know, parts that are like preemptively trying to make sure we don't get stressed out. So in the world of protective parts, there are reactive parts, and there are parts that are trying to prevent stress from happening. Now, if you don't get all that and you don't have all that down, it's fine. Because usually when I'm just experiencing my parts, I'll sort of get the flavor of like, okay, does this part have an agenda? Meaning, like, is it on a mission of some kind? Does it want to protect me from being embarrassed? Does it want to judge me before other people judge me? Does it want to put me down before I actually try to do something, so I'll cut my losses somehow? Is it obsessively worrying so that I am not hurt or that I protect myself more? Is it making sure that I numb out because my whole system has been maxed out completely? So you kind of get the sense there's a mission for these protective parts. In the IFS world, therapy world, they're called firefighters and managers. But for right now, I just sort of think of them as protective. Because for me, I'm like, oh, this part definitely like has a mission and will be upset if I don't do it. So that really helps a lot to be able to put it in that framework. And then the other tricky protectors are the ones that sound all like good and altruistic, of like, oh, you really don't want to be doing these behaviors. Like, oh, we really should have healthy food. And like, yes, at the end of the day, it makes sense to be healthy. But if you have a part that's like, its only agenda is like, you only need to eat healthy food, or you only need to have happy thoughts, or you only need to try to stay positive, that's a mission, that's an agenda, right? So I know this exists everywhere, but California is definitely into spiritual bypassing, which is like trying to stay positive and like manifesting, that in order to manifest what you really want, you have to have a certain energy in order for things to come to you. And while it's true that we attract things in a certain way, the way that we do that is by dealing with our shadow, so that then we can actually transform the energy. So our shadow being the parts, and then we can transform the energy into being integrated, instead of us being so torn apart in terms of our roles of the parts having to take on so much stress to try to protect ourselves. So the other type of parts are parts that hold wounding. So trauma, kid parts, inner children. I want to put out there that it's not just inner children that hold wounding. It can also be adults that experience hardship that have wounding. I think the biggest challenge with the time that we're in right now is that there's no actual way to process it. So we're like in this position where, you know, there's a very hard thing that's happening, and our child parts are needing a lot of soothing. They need a lot of self to show up right now, just to normalize that no matter how they're responding, no matter what protection is happening around them, completely makes sense. It completely makes sense that they would be feeling whatever they're feeling right now. And so child parts and protective parts usually need to hear that they're being seen and that they're being heard. The most important thing that I have found in this work is that parts get validation, that they get seen and that they get heard. And then if they get like curiosity and compassion, that helps them a lot too. But the beginning, if you can't cultivate compassion or self-love, it's enough to be able to just see and hear your parts. Like that's like more than enough to be able to see and hear it. So what are our parts being seen by? And that would be self. So we all have the intrinsic ability to witness what's happening internally in our mind and body. And that's a window towards our authentic self. It's a self that doesn't have an agenda. It simply observes. So the observing self, no matter what you're feeling, doesn't have an agenda. Even if you're like, oh, wow, I'm really anxious right now. Let me just notice that. Like there's no agenda if you're noticing. So witnessing is a very primary aspect of self. And then there's other qualities of self that don't have agendas, like calm, clarity, like when you have actual intuition, when you're like, I am clear about this, there's actual clarity. And, compassion, just being able to see and hear someone and potentially have a sense of open-heartedness towards them. Those are all qualities of self. Being able to have a sense of creativity when things are stagnant, just to be able to think outside of the box and have a sense of playfulness. I believe that safety is also what helps authentic self to come online. So having a sense of feeling safe and feeling protected. And during this time, I'm really finding that just the reminder that like we are in this moment, we're safe. We're here, we're on this call, we're all in our homes, we're safe. No matter what's happening, like there is a safety and a knowing right now in this moment, right? And a lot of times it has to be moment to moment, which is fine because we have the moment. So being able to come back to self when parts try to drive the bus is the work. So like there are many times where, parts of me want to drive the bus where they like, oh, sleeping is like a big thing right now for me. I know I've talked about this with some of you, but like, it's just like, okay, can you just wake me up when all of this is over? Thanks. I'm going to, I'm just going to go to sleep. So we all have parts that I think are reacting to what's happening. And just to be able to, at first I was really struggling with it. Like I was like, oh my gosh, this sleep part is like taking me out, and, I'm losing time, and like critical parts can come in and start to criticize it. So just being able to notice critical parts when they come up and then ask them for space, like, okay, it makes sense we're sleeping this much. Critical part, can you just, and we ask parts for space. Can you give me space to just be able to be with the part that wants to sleep? And really being able to ask for space, that is the moment of what we call unblending. So you have a part that's reacting, and then in this case, you have the sleepy part and the critical part, right? So you have a part that's reacting and the part that I'm curious about. So by noticing them and by asking for space, there's a way of unblending. Like my authentic self starts to have some space so that they don't take over the entire day, right? And I've also learned over time that if they do take over the entire day, that they must have needed to do that. My body and my mind must have needed that protection somehow, and to just like try to have acceptance over, okay, that must have been what I needed. So having the critical part, asking the critical part for space, I could then become curious about a part that's sleepy, that wants to kind of minimize the stressors. And so then I could just ask that part, like, and it was like, yeah, we don't want to have to deal with everything that's going on. And for me to just have compassion of like, yeah, I really get that. I understand it. There's actually no way to process this. And over time, it's actually gotten better. And there are times where I'm like, yeah, I'm exhausted. Let me just, I will allow this part to take over so that we can just get some rest, which is fine. It's going to be a more tiring period right now. And that's very different from like allowing myself to engage with this part. To have a relationship with it is really the goal. And that's what helps with integration, is having a relationship with all of these parts from a place of self, from a place of being curious, calm, witnessing. And I think of it as like a reparenting process, because most of us didn't have like the exact well-adjusted, perfect parenting that we wanted. So because that's the case, we get to have the opportunity to reparent our parts in the way that they needed it. So in that vein, we're actually gonna put down any like pens or any thoughts and about what the system is. Just asking any intellectual parts or figuring it out parts for space, so that we can just come into a meditation practice. So for right now, just putting everything down and just getting into a comfortable position. So you want it to be a position that is both upright, where you're awake and alert, but there's also a sense of calm or openness, allowing the body to feel both relaxed and supported. So just taking a moment to get comfortable. The body can be felt being upright, but not too tight. And just finding the middle of your sits bones, maybe rocking back and forth a little bit till you find the middle of your sits bones. And stacking your spine one on top of the other, gently, like gold coins being stacked upon each other, all the way up to the crown of the head, and the crown being held almost by an invisible string, so that the crown is upwards towards the sky, being supported gently. Just taking a moment to relax the jaw and the mouth. Just loosening your mouth so that it's a little bit open. having to make too much effort. And just feeling your place on the earth in this moment. And that this place on the earth is a birthright. Just feeling your seat, the contact that your body has on the chair or couch. And just noticing your breath. Noticing the felt sense of the breath in the body. Perhaps where you feel it the most. And for right now, you'll notice thoughts, sensation, or images connected to parts of you, perhaps connected to parts that we're thinking about parts, and just asking them for space and smiling at whatever you notice during this meditation, knowing that it's all part of the meditation. There's no wrong way to do this. And coming back to the sensation of your inhale and your exhale. And again, smiling at parts and asking them for space, and extending your inhale and your exhale in a way that's gentle and slow. Breathing up from the earth all the way up the spine to the crown of the head, and then down the spine back into the earth. Having the mouth slightly open on the exhale, allowing for the air to come out of the mouth and in through the nose on the exhale, on the inhale. So inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth at your own pace. Continuing to ask parts of you for space, and smiling at them whenever they make themselves known through thought or sensation. And coming back to inhaling up through the earth, up the spine, and then back down into the earth. And starting to notice the space between thoughts, the space between your inhale and your exhale. And the more we notice this spacious awareness, the more we can notice our parts and notice the space between our parts, leading us to self through spaciousness and observation. And just dropping any effort on the breath, Just allowing the body to be breathed. And just imagining yourself in a safe place in nature. Could be a place that's familiar to you or one that you make up with your parts. And just gathering any parts of you that you notice around you in this place in nature. So really seeing the vibrant colors here, the qualities of this place in nature that you adore. Notice the feeling that this place in nature gives your body and gives to all of your parts. And what connections to self come from this place in nature. Sense of calm, clarity, compassion, open-heartedness, spaciousness, connection. And that the sunlight is here in this place in nature, shining down on you and all of your parts gathered around you. And just letting them all know that they're all welcome here. Even if some parts object to that, allowing them to feel welcome too. And having all the parts and all of you experience this sunlight that's increasing in brightness around your body and around the bodies of all of your parts. And just having a sense of looking upwards towards this light. Deepening a state of relaxation and calm. And just letting all the parts know that you're here for them. And that the more space that they give you, the more they'll be able to be seen and heard. And just seeing if they hear you or not. So having a sense of curiosity towards whether they're hearing you or not, knowing there's no right answer to that. And just noticing any parts that are wanting more attention than others, with a sense of friendliness. Just noticing them, having a sense of curiosity towards them. And perhaps having one part tell you why it's important for you to see them. Maybe one or two sentences. And just letting them know that you see them and hear them. And thanking them for giving you space and also letting you know why it's important that they're seen and heard. And just letting them know you're going to come back to them. You're not going to forget about them. And seeing them come back into the gathering with all the rest of the parts. Just letting them know that you want to hear and see them all. But again, the more space that they give you, the more they'll be able to be seen and heard, because they won't be alone. There'll be somebody here with them to witness them and be with them. And if there's any part that is having difficulty giving you space, just allowing for them to have their own area in this place in nature. It could be like their own tent, it could be their own house, it could be their own bed, whatever it is that they need to give you even more space. And just letting all the parts know that you're here to comfort them all. And thanking them for anything that they shared with you during this time. And again, looking up to the light that's surrounding you and surrounding your parts here in this safe place in nature. Feeling the qualities of self that support all the parts in you right now. And perhaps noticing any other ancestors or beings that support you right now. Letting the parts know that you'll keep coming back to them. And just for you to notice that this sense of spaciousness flashing to this light and this place in nature is possible at any time. And just being able to flash upon this image throughout the day, come back to your breath in a moment, that's always available to you to create spaciousness so that you can show up for your parts or for the parts of others. And just thanking your parts and thanking yourself for your efforts. Extending a sense of gratitude towards anything that supports you right now, including all the presence of everybody on this call, everybody who is watching this, and being together. May the resonance of our efforts benefit all beings. And ending your formal practice in any way that feels right to you. And then coming back into the room, slowly opening your eyes if you haven't already. And continuing to have the same intention once your eyes are open. Just noticing the space around you. And just noticing perhaps what feels like a pleasant thing to look at or notice. In and around your space. Of course, you'll have parts that say lots of other things about your space, but yeah, just noticing things around the room that give you comfort, and also noticing your body in the chair or couch. And without sharing out loud, if you could grab a piece of paper or a pen, if you haven't already. If you have colored pens, that would be great, but if not, just a pen is fine. And just getting comfortable and drawing or making symbols of how you experienced both self and parts during the meditation. And I'll repeat the instruction again. Making either art, a drawing, a symbol of both how you experience parts and self in the meditation.